Hey everyone, you got Joe Glines here out of Dallas and Jackie,
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Yeah.
Denmark. And
Yeah, Denmark.
I'm fitting that you have a little Christmas tree over your shoulder there. I assume it's a Christmas
Yeah,
tree,
that one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
but
And
so
that's a little what's it called? Eh, elf. I think you call them
oh,
elf.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, cool. Yeah, we get off topic a lot talking about our different holidays and stuff and culture. He's in Denmark, I'm in Dallas in the United States. It's fun. Anyway, so today our quick chat is going to be on kind of like why people, after they've seen the power of AutoHotkey, what happens, like what the disconnect, why they don't follow through and actually start adopt using it themselves, right? Now, I'll differentiate on this to say it's not that like we write a custom script for them and they can run it, right? People do that a lot. I think it's fine because it's, as far as I know, it's just another program that runs, right? That has a certain way they use it. It's more about kind of like writing their own code, even as simple as doing hot strings, right? Or hotkeys or whatever. Just for my batting average is pretty darn low for the amount of people I will demonstrate the functionality and things you can do with it. And then it's so few that actually end up picking up AutoHotkey and doing anything with it, let alone something simple. And so we thought it'd be kind of fun to brainstorm, hopefully not just complaining about it, but on better ways to get more people to actually, pick it up. One of which we've talked about before was, is it a smart move? Like usually what I do is I'll say, hey, let's have an hour and I'll show you some of the capabilities and kind of get you an intro to starting your own script. And I show them, things like web scraping and API calls and regular expressions and, my screen clipping tool and, manipulating files in your computer and creating images and so many things you can do with it, right? Also connecting to Windows itself or connecting to Outlook, automating emails and automating Excel and you name it. And my thought is, I wonder if, even though that's a great way to get people excited, but it's also daunting and overwhelming and people just don't know where to start. The problem, it's a catch-22 to me, right? Because if I just show them like hot strings or hotkeys, which would be like the intro thing to me, like I would start someone on, it's usually what I encourage people to start with, is then they think that's all it is, and they don't think it's that powerful, and they don't really think it's worth their time learning. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I've not shown it to that many people. I've of course shared my ability,
Sure.
But pretty quickly I started or stopped, whatever you call that, trying to
Evangelize.
Yeah, exactly, because people just, their eyes kind of glazed over as soon as I showed them just the most simple piece of code. And to me, it's kind of amazing that people they almost don't try. Where with let's say an Excel formula or something, people will sit there and debug it and fix and try and everything to make something very simple, calculate a row, whatever.
Right.
And I'm like,
I love that comparison.
Yeah, that's not different from writing a piece of syntax for a script or something like that. So.
Right. No, that's
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how to really get over that hurdle of them making a script.
Especially in Excel, because in Excel, often you're using an Excel function and you're putting in parameters in the function and literally like you're coding, right? I mean, you're using like a function AutoHotkey, putting in parameters to where it is and references and yeah, that's spot on. And yet when you switch to AutoHotkey, suddenly it's abstract to them, I guess, right? Whereas with Excel, they have a GUI.
Yeah, and that's some of the things that I've said before. Excel as a database and as a way for humans to see data structure, whatever, it just works. people just get it. The tables, the way, the rows, the columns, and the way that things are almost visually shown to them, and it has numbers and it has row counts and all that stuff. So working with arrays in that manner kind of comes quite easily to people who have a need for it. But as soon as you move it outside of Excel and make all of that something that you need to have in your head, to kind of build and keep in some kind of structure, I'm not sure they wish to do that. That might be the thing.
Yeah, and I'd put it on two levels. I'd say there's the desire, and it's not quite desire either, I would say, but it's because it's also, to me, a lot of people these days just don't have the ability, right, to kind of compartmentalize in their head and think about it. It's much more abstract, right? But even then, like when I'm doing stuff in AutoHotkey, I'll sketch out notes to myself of like explaining what I'm doing. Now I don't write it out like a grid, which you're saying like an array, which honestly might have helped me when I was first learning arrays or objects and just kind of helping get that structure down, right? But yeah, and it did. And it's kind of, I feel like it's kind of like in The Matrix, when the movie, when they're first watching the code and they see the streaming code, they're like, no one sees that. Sure, no one sees that. But when I used to look at objects or an array, I couldn't see it, if that makes sense. And then now it's so much easier for me to absorb. When I look at it, I can spot it in a second and see the key value pairs or whatever and understand what's going on.
Yeah, and I'd say, of course, over time, looking at AutoHotkey syntax, maybe going to MSDN, learning COM, whatever it might be, working with Excel. It can be a lot of different ways that you do it, but because the examples might be in a slightly different language, you kind of learn the syntax and the way to read a syntax. So even though whatever they have on MSDN or some other website, it might be for Java or it might be for JavaScript, or it might be for some, and it kind of becomes familiar in some way, at least, so you're not put off just because it's formatted differently. And that's one of the things that I think comes with looking at it over time. And at the beginning, when you're only used to having that one bar at the top or down in the cell in Excel or whatever it may be, having to fix those two parameters, and you have whatever you are calling are in very fixed places, it's very easy to kind of abstract to the end goal of that. But when you control all of the naming yourself, and you need to call the things, and then some might have tried, I don't know, but if they hit a small snag of trying to activate the window and it doesn't do it, and then after debugging it and maybe asking someone, they find out it's because Windows names are case sensitive, and they're like, okay, I used 3 hours on this. And then they drop it because it's a small thing.
So actually that leads into one of the other things I want to bring up was often people look at this as a means to solving this problem today, right now, not an overall investment in the long run, how I can learn how to do things better. Right. Yeah. And the example you just gave me, they, instead of saying, wow, I finally figured out a way I can do this going forward, they say I lost 2.5 hours because it could have done it in 30 minutes myself. No, in the long run. And hey, you know what? You'll never make that mistake again. Right.
That's the thing. At least if you stay with one language for long enough, you'll get the hang of those very special whatever you call that, but kinks or whatever it might be. And the thing to me is also I've tried to kind of sit there live coding in front or with, or have them have a need on the side and me simply writing the script while they look at me doing it, while even maybe explaining it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
To kind of say, hey, see how you do it. And to me, over time, that became simpler and simpler. And that's irritating. But still, none of them actually ended up making their own.
Your mic level just dropped a little. I don't know if it
moved. I moved that, or maybe it dropped because
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, apparently. Anyway, yeah. So, but and it's interesting also because, like I said, even now I'll have Maestriath, I'll pay him to do something. I'll watch him code, and it works for me because I can still understand what he's writing, right? And I don't have to ask every other sentence, every after letter, right? What is that doing? But when you're new and you're watching someone else do it, it's just all kind of Greek and all foreign, and you're trying to absorb all this information at once. And so I think it's much harder. The alternative is you sit there and you tell them what to type, right? Which I think to some degree helps a little bit, but it's still like they have no clue. Like you got to go so slow to make sure people really get it, understand it, not just type the right words.
Yeah, and that's. I think it probably comes down to that general thing that we have talked about before, as you just did, where they're looking at, I can do this in half an hour. I'm so bad at coding. I'll need to use 3 hours or whatever to get something that might work today. And when I need to do the task again tomorrow, I might need to fix it a little bit and use maybe an hour tomorrow to do that half hour of work. So this week I'll have used 2 extra hours on that exact task. The thing that comes, which I believe they don't really grasp, is if they actually make it work without error, which is quite possible.
Mm-hmm.
Next week when that task comes up, they'll save maybe 45 minutes on the task that week, and the week after when it comes again, and people have a very hard time of seeing a task come again, if it's not something that's predefined as something that will come again.
Right.
But the tasks just so often do.
Well, and to take that, your exact point, but look at it a little bit differently, is identifying that you have a repetitive task, right? Often you think, oh, it's not the same thing because I do this and then I do this other thing to it, right? Which means it's not the same task. No, you can just automate part of it, right? You don't have to automate the entire thing. Find the thing that's common across them, or break it down to where it's something small, right? And then suddenly you start saying, oh, wow, I do write an email to the same people every week, right? Starting off with, here are the same attachments from this file. Okay, all right, great. I can automate that part. And then I customize the message, right?
I'd say that's even how I started using it. I found AutoHotkey. It could have been whatever other language that's easy to go to. But I found it had a few examples that did parts of what I needed. I needed, and I've said this many times before, to copy a value from one window to another window.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, all I really needed was to be able to copy multiple things while in one window, and then shift to the other window and paste multiple things. Of course, hotkeys. I think I used the F keys or something like that back in the time. So Control F2 would copy the thing I had selected into one variable, and so on and so forth. And then I could copy maybe 7 different strings from one page. And then I manually switched to the other window. And then I pasted them with Alt F2, 3, 4. While I selected the fields that I needed to do it in. And when I had done that a few times, I'd gotten that, it works quite well. I was like, but when I clicked the last of them, the F8, couldn't it then switch the window for me?
Right.
And it could, and that was great. So the last one, it actually switched the window.
Yeah.
And then when it got to that window, I was like, but it's already in the first field. Couldn't it then just paste in the first value?
Right.
And that's how I started, and that's how I built and built and built on it by simply doing my task, incorporating very, very small parts of it, and automating that instead of having to hit Control-C, shift window, back and forth. Right. I made a small script with 7 hotkeys in it, and I'd already made my task much easier. And by very, very small steps at a time, I made something that today is, a great skill. Really, really.
Yeah. So with the other thing I'd say is there's that bit about like they think they have to, that's one of the reasons why people do is that it's daunting that like I have this major thing I have to automate and it's over my head. I can't, they think they have to automate the entire thing all at once. And it's like, more often than not, that's almost always, I got to say, like 99%, maybe higher, you don't have to automate the entire thing, right? You can compartmentalize it, break it down, and like you said, automate this a little bit this week and next week we'll add to it a little bit more and ease into it.
Yeah, and that's the exact thing. It's because people see the entire task from start to finish as what needs to be automated. And if you were going to pay someone to do it for you, that would be what you asked for. I want this to end with this or whatever. But when you're doing it yourself, just as whatever coder you would hire would have to go in and analyze all the small steps and then take it in chunks. That's the easiest way of doing it. And at one point with all of this, the robots are going to take our jobs and whatnot. I had one where they said every task, no matter the size, can be cut into smaller pieces. And as soon as you get down to tasks that takes a human under 30 seconds or something like that, a computer can do it. The thing is that almost everything we do can be cut down into chunks of 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. No, it's not that you move the mouse, then click that, then shift window, and then put it there. No, first is move the mouse. That was the first thing I said. And that takes you shorter than 30 seconds to do. So, and then comes the click, and then comes, And I think that people have a very hard time of seeing what they're doing themselves in those sequential order. They just see, I send an email to someone. They don't remember that first they think of what they need to write, who they need to write it to, then they click create email, then the email comes up, then they write the email. Okay.
Subject line, doing the thing. Yeah, absolutely. The other one, which is an interesting aspect of it too, is part of it is also because people always say, I hear this so much, I'm just too busy. Right. And it's kind of ironic because, of course, you'd be less busy if you actually automated your, parts of your job or your life. But I'll point a big finger at most companies or bosses that don't, for whatever reason, right, which we can get into. But they what I don't understand is why they don't honestly say, I want you to spend 20% of your time figuring out how you can automate your job. Right. Or maybe start at 15% if you want, if 20 is too much, and say, because in the long run, they're going to benefit. The company will benefit, right? It should be driven by the management, right, and the higher level people to say, let's do what we can to streamline the mundane part of it, and have people do for the profitable part. But then honestly, they can get paid more per hour anyway, right? Because they're being more productive.
I'd say that I don't know if you noticed, Click. It's a BBC program that's pretty popular also on the internet, and Click is expanding into the entire BBC network, so it's beginning to become a public thing. And they were in India just recently talking to all of these tech support, whatever, people typing data in India. which was one of the cheapest way to do that.
Sure.
But they have in recent years been tasked to automate their tasks. So because you have so many people that are able to code in India,
right,
people are hiring them to code tasks that Indians are hired to do. So at the moment, India is kind of having a movement of some sort that is kind of like they're automating themselves out of a job.
Right.
Perhaps. Who knows if that's going to be the end thing. But at least where we are at, automating part of your job, mundane tasks or whatnot, or maybe even bigger things, if you just do a good enough job, nobody is coming after you for saying, hey, you used 10 hours on automating this. If the task is something that will eventually take 10 hours to do.
Yeah, or more like 50, right, or 1,000, right? It's often things that you end up, you're spending a lot of time on them, right? It's just, it's how frequently you're doing them, right, is the issue.
I'd say in the beginning, when I started at the one that I said, I don't know how many values I could have copied back and forth in that manual way compared to having automated it. But I can say so that I was there for 2 years, and I had made an entire program that all of that company was, all 5,000 employees were using on a daily basis, where all of it was built in AutoHotkey, and it was doing amazing amounts of stuff.
Yeah.
And I made it in 2 years, and I made it while at work. So even though I had that data task that I was working on constantly, because I actually managed to automate it in the beginning, I at one point had so much time that I could extend over to other things with that script. And because the closest leader to me allowed me to do that, because
exactly, right,
fascinating as well, it was possible. And the company ended up getting a much better product and much more out of actually having hired me for that amount of time than if I had just used the entire 2 years of moving the data.
I might have mentioned this to you before, but when I worked in research, my colleague who he got late, we had this project. It was a customer satisfaction study. We started off paying an external vendor like $150,000 to field the study, and then my colleague on my team he didn't field the survey and stuff, but he would get the results and analyze it and report on it. And so they first cut the external vendor the $150,000, right? And I'm like, hey, I think we can do this in-house, and just we can program it and do it ourselves. And so my boss said, okay. And then they cut my friend, right? And I said, I think I can take that was his entire job, was reporting on that one study, right? Mm-hmm. So I said, I think I can pick this up as one of my projects, still do it in 9 languages, right? Nonetheless, and still do my normal job, right? And so I did all this stuff as just part of my, and I wasn't using actually I did, because I was using hot strings for writing my syntax, but it was in SPSS, but it was using SPSS syntax and macros, because I was programming it, right? And it allowed me to automate, and the programming of the survey too, I automated that and automated the different languages. But again, like you said, my boss got it, right? So he was all over it. I actually quit the company. It's funny. But I said, hey, I don't really want to leave you guys hanging here. The study was still going. I said, if you like, for 3 months, I'll work on the side and finish it for you. And so they actually paid me. I got paid double because I was working the other company. But again, anyway, it was I did amazing things there with just because I had learned how to program and saved them a ton of money.
But I'd say, at least for me, and I don't know if it was the same for you, I didn't start out by asking my manager, hey, can I automate this?
Oh, absolutely. No, yeah.
No, the task was so mind-numbing that I was just like, there must be some kind of loophole or way to jump over where the fence is shortest, or whatever you'd say that. Yeah. And I found something small and I built up on it. And again, if someone had scrutinized my use of my exact hours at that time,
sure,
I would have been poor performing because, hey, I used a lot of time on debugging whatever small errors were there. And as I was a beginner, it took time. But because nobody was right there on my shoulder, I only had a deadline at one point out in the future. But someone wasn't really keeping track of, are you hitting, are you going to make it, what?
Yes.
At least for
had
me.
Autonomy. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. No, it's a really good point to bring up, that you got to have the freedom to succeed or fail on your own. As long as, you're touching base and saying, I'm going to hit there. Yeah, we got it. But yeah.
Exactly. Of course, someone is allowed to just kind of get input on, are we kind of on schedule or what? Or are we really just floating, whatever you call that, sinking? But yeah. Normally I'd say, and I've had great use of that, and it has really helped me that there was this freedom for me to kind of do the task in the way that I wanted to do it, as long as the result was correct and I got there on whatever time was set.
But the other thing, though, I'd throw that in there because, I've done, and I interviewed you too, right? I interviewed a lot of people who use AutoHotkey, talking to them, how'd you get into it? And the other key one that you mentioned earlier was you basically had just said, I couldn't, it's just too mundane. I can't just do this over. There's got to be a better way, right? And so many people that I interviewed said basically the same thing. There was like, this sucks. There must be a better way where I don't have to manually do this. And they usually stumble upon AutoHotkey. And I think that's one of those things that we realize what I should have been doing was finding people who are actually willing to like improve themselves or find, they're interested in learning more and in attending training and whatnot, because it's that kind of mentality of like, I want to find a better way to do something and I'm willing to invest my time in it. Right. And I'm picking people who they have the need, but it's almost like that. I think I mentioned there's a millennial I talked to, and he talked everything like you said. He's like, oh, I automated all the stuff at work, and the people at work they didn't care. They just said, okay, well now that's that. But and they gave me more work to do, and I'm like, well, just automate the new stuff. And he's like, yeah, but I don't have time to do that. I'm like, well, just do it on your own time, right? Take the time to start automating it, and then the time saved, don't tell them. Right. And just use that to learn more. Right. And that was like such a foreign concept to him. Like that's what I did. Right. I was working a lot of hours and I would push through it and learn AutoHotkey and still kind of work. But like you, I didn't have day-to-day deadlines. So it wasn't hard to make sure I finished. I kept on par with everyone else. But then after a little bit, I was able to do more than everyone else and spend 25% of my time, or 20% somewhere in there of just learning how to code, learning how to automate. And part of it's learning and part of it was actual coding. But a lot of it, I was just reading the forum and going through like examples you do on the forum, and I'd work through them and slowly over a beating, figure out how it worked. But
that's the exact same thing I did. I had, let's say I had this, maybe I could do, who knows, a couple of thousand entries a day or whatever. And as the script wasn't fully automated at the beginning, and it might do chunks of 100 or whatnot, but it did it at a pace that was unlike my own. And it could even do it at some point. It started being able to do it while, let's say I went to the bathroom or whatnot. I might not have been away for that many minutes while it was running because, hey, I still needed to see that it did it correctly and stuff like that. But I was so trustful of what I had done because I'd watched it do it over and over, and I'd done it in so small steps so that I knew every one small step actually worked. But instead of saying, hey, see what I can do 20,000 entries now. or whatever it might have been in a day. I kept that, as you said yourself, to myself. I kept up with the pace that was needed, building on it. And at one point, I could make an entire day's deadline, or whatever you might call that, quota in my lunch break. I could just start it when that started. So of course I had time to build on my own skills, and that's also why I had time to maybe help people on the forums and again extend my own knowledge and my own skills on it, and then build out from there. And when I finally took the chance and told whoever I work with about it, and the great thing there was that they then took it like a champ and said, hey, we want more of that. And now I had that basic amount of skill, so I could actually do more than what they were seeing. Do you get what I'm saying? So build it small, get to at least some level where you can make stuff that seemingly works as intended, and then show it to someone. And don't do it before then. Then just work on it slowly.
Which it's sad, and that's one of the things that annoys me. Is that the employer, whether you're manager or whoever, should be smart enough to be asking for this, and yet I kind of feel kind of dirty that I got to hide it. But it's truly, and actually it's a win-win, right? It's like I'm improving myself, and yet the company's going to benefit as well. But it's never, at least in my experience, it's never been it's so rare where you're asked, that it's acceptable for you to just say, oh, I'll work on this. But actually when I went back to work at TI, that was when I switched out of market research into internet marketing, they purposely hired me because I didn't know anything about SQL. That was my main job, but my job would burn people out every year to year and a half. The people would quit because it was so mundane, and they're like, we can't keep training people then losing them. So they wanted someone who could learn how to automate and streamline. And so thankfully I had that backing when I went in. So it was expected me to automate in that job. But it's just super rare. It's nice when that's the case, but when you have a regular job, it's not necessarily the case.
Just a small example for something that I see where immediately I'm like, okay, this person I'm not gonna even try and attempt to teach them, is that because at one point I couldn't spell anything, nothing, almost. Maybe 2-letter words or something like that. So when I needed to, let's say, put in my information on the internet, if I had put it in once, I would copy it if I needed it again. I would never rewrite it because, oh my God. I'd need to sit there and read one letter at a time to kind of so copy, paste. That was work. So when I see people who write to me complex words and then need to write them again, and then they type them out, and I'm like, oh, really? Yeah. And of course, it takes them 5 seconds to write it out. It would have taken them 4 to copy and paste it or something like that. The amount of time with that small thing is very, very small. But when they do that, I don't believe that I can teach them to automate stuff. That's very, very
it's interesting.
Hard put up, but yeah.
I love what you just said though, because it actually gives me thinking we need a test, right? Of here are the 3 things you watch a person, you say read this chapter, right? You ask them to actually do something on their own. Right. And then you watch, ask them these 3 things. And I bet you we could find a very well prediction of the likelihood they would actually, start learning how to automate their jobs. So I was making some notes here. I was thinking about, so what are things we can do to help improve the likelihood that people will adopt it? One was, that their interest alone in improving or self-improvement type things, right? They got to be self-driven and want to improve. having autonomy at work, which we were talking about, like if it is at work, where you can have some freedom to do this kind of stuff, that's really helpful. Clearly, they have to have a need, right? Of course, I think you and I agree. Virtually everybody actually has the need, whether they realize it or not, right? And most people, in some way or another, like they're doing stuff that definitely could be automated. Here's one I didn't. Actually, I'll put the second one first, and I'll talk on the other one next. Helping educate people a little bit on troubleshooting, right? You mentioned earlier, because troubleshooting is a skill that a lot of people don't understand how to dissect what they're doing and what's working and what's not. And spending a little more time, because of course, who wants to learn how to troubleshoot when you're trying to learn how to code? Because you want to learn how to make something work, not how to do this other stuff. Yet, man, if you spend a little time learning how to debug something and how to use message boxes and show variables and where you are, like, holy cow, the rest of your life is so much easier, right? So I'd say emphasizing troubleshooting earlier in the game when you teach people, like actually include how to work on troubleshooting. But the next one is the one I liked was we almost need like a buddy system, right? Because that's the other one is like I tell people, look, you need to try to solve it on your own. But what I don't want you to do is to spend 8 hours trying to figure out one line of code, right? Spend 30 minutes. Because if you don't spend any time, then you don't actually learn it. You just come to me and I answer your problem and you never learn anything. And you're always coming to me. And of course, I don't want that. I'd love teaching people how to, feed themselves. But I do think I mentioned for you, right? I used AutoHotkey for I don't know how many years before I first posted a question on the forum. It was a really long time. And I knew no one else who used AutoHotkey. And so had I have known, and then actually that was when I started asking you for some help here and there. I would post in the forum, and then you would often answer it, and then we started chatting on the side, and it made it so much easier now. Like, depending on what I'm doing, if I'm doing web scraping or if I'm doing something complex with a COM object or something, I might ask you for it. If I'm doing something with XPath or something, Maestria knows that like there's no tomorrow, right? Or if I have people who work in certain areas that I know, like on this kind of a topic, I know who to ask for help, just to see if they've done it before. But teaching them how to go ahead.
No, but I actually liked what you were saying, and I just got this reference in my head to this Discord chat we have in the AutoHotkey community, and they've just reworked some of it and made more channels. So you have a GUI channel, a hotkey channel.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that.
2 channel, and
that's awesome.
And RedX channel and stuff like that, so that people can kind of sign up as I have some expertise.
That's excellent. I love it.
Tag me if you want help with GUIs and if you help. So it just makes sense so people can get more exact help.
Yeah. Well, and at the same time, it does both, right? It's more that you're lining up both. I'm in our forum too, the regular forum. Usually they're too broad, right? But it's like, ask for help forum, right? Then there's the finished script forum, and then there's, tutorials. But wouldn't it be awesome if, like you're saying in Discord, it's not just here are the experts looking, but here's also where you should post that question, right? Yeah. So it's not all over the place, right? It's a win-win.
I'd say I'm not sure how deep the forum should go, because I've always been kind of like, but yeah, it could perhaps be an idea to have these. I don't know if they need to be sub, but you could have the ask for help, and then have sub forums under that, one for GUIs, one for hotkeys, one for whatever. Maybe I'm not saying those are the exact correct ones, but something like that, because
even if they weren't different forums, but we had a way to somehow categorize when you do put in the topic that you're looking at, right? Would help.
Yeah. I know at one point someone had this idea of using labels. Some forums have them. I'm not sure what ours do, but where you could pick from a label list to kind of say, this is what my topic is about. And of course, sometimes you would have that in the title of the topic or the question, but yeah, labels you have that on Stack Overflow, you have that on Reddit, you have that on different platforms. where you kind of tag it with something so that people can search for that specifically or filter on it or what it might be. So if someone is trying to learn GUI stuff, yeah, don't do that. If people are trying to learn stuff like that, they could look up that specifically. And of course, that's why I'm thinking about the subforums, because then you could go into the subforum and then search that specifically in the hopes of getting more precise results. But yeah.
Right. Well, and again, like you said, with the Discord, even the people who are trying to help people know which ones to look at, right? Specifically, if I want to help people with regex, I can watch this one in particular, right? Or GUIs, tree views, whatever it is, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that made good sense there. And what you, yeah.
We're running up to about 40 minutes right now, so
fair enough.
I think that's a pretty good discussion on the topic overall. Of like, there is no easy answer, I think, unfortunately.
There's
often I think the reason, at least it's easy to say, right, and blame the other people, but I think the biggest reason why people don't end up adopting it is more about the person that, that started it. It's not about AutoHotkey itself. It's not about us trying to teach them. It's more about their level of interest in actually learning how to do something themselves.
Yeah, I'd say I haven't interviewed a lot of people or anything like that. I'm just thinking this right in this moment is that I don't believe I've heard of anybody saying that my friend showed me this, so that's why I've learned it. It's almost, as you said yourself, it's almost everybody is sitting with some kind of task in front of them. It might be a game, it might be work, it might be whatever. And they kind of like, there must be an easier way to either do whatever in a game or to get that task at work done. Yeah. It's still the same mental thing that's kind of not an epiphany or whatever that's called, but that thing in your head where you're like, I must be able to do this thing in a simpler way, save self time or do something that makes this less mind numbing. I do believe that's what's needed.
Yeah. I was gonna say, it's kind of funny. It could also, it's kind of sad, but if you are in such a tight crunch that you realize there is just no way that I can manually keep up or get this job done in time, right? That's also when it's not just that it's mundane and I hate doing it, but suddenly they're like, hey, actually, instead of having 50 of these things due next week, you have 10,000, right? That'll force you to say, oh man, I got to find a better way to do this. And they'll have the interest, right?
Yeah, the thing is that the task, as you said yourself, it can be such a daunting task or whatever. I think you used that word earlier. Yeah. So yeah, having so much work that you need to have done that your best idea to make it is to use some kind of help, automation, whatever. Yeah. But yeah, it might be hard to come from nothing and get that. But yeah, it could also be a good way to promote oneself, is if you can actually manage to do that amount of work in the slotted time. Yeah.
But I think, well, maybe we'll kick around some other ideas for that kind of screener questionnaire of like how to profile someone to see if they are a right fit to spend. Because I mean, you're the same way. I know you've done it as much as I have or more on the forum. Is helping teach people how to do this stuff, right? I love it, right? But it's frustrating when you spend all the time and then the people don't end up picking it up at all. right?
Yeah. And one of the things that I've just thought of while we were talking is that people in the hotkey community may not come in with a programming mindset, or not mindset, but
background.
Not many of them come in and think, I want to be a programmer.
Yeah, well, you and I still don't either, right?
but some might. And I feel like, of course, someone educated in hardcore coding can also automate tasks, but the work involved in coding the steps in a task is very different from, let's say, coding an app for hailing a cab.
Oh, sure.
Those two things are just so far from each other. So automating and interacting with what other people has coded before you is something very different from actually making something from scratch that might be only talking to APIs.
Yeah.
That's just, those two things are, the code might be similar, but the use of it and the mental thing that you need to have going on is two very different things.
It's that I think there's something to this, to your example when you really focused on Excel versus using AutoHotkey, right? Because the API versus web scraping, right? Yeah. The web scraping in a browser, even though I agree the COM objects and stuff, it's a little more complicated, but still people can see it and go like, oh, I'm getting that and I'm doing this and I'm doing it. And an API call, you're really doing the same thing, just programmatically. Yet, for most people, the API call is so obscure that they just have a really hard time wrapping their brain around it and actually doing it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, let's wrap it up there then, because these quick chats get to be not so quick.
Absolutely, that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, man. Till next time.
Yeah. Bye.